All right. Hello there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Kink Tank. And we have a pretty good panel put together tonight. And our topics that I wanted to cover, well, the topic for this episode, anyways, is discretion in social media. You know, a lot of us use different kinds of social networks, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, but then there's also FetLife and other, sort of kinky online dating or OkCupid. We use a lot of those, and there seems to be, some concern that people have about keeping their sense of discretion, not being out to people that they haven't chosen to be out to. So I thought we might try and do a little tips and tricks type thing for people, mistakes that you've made, good practices for sort of keeping your stuff limited to the people that you want to see it. So let's start. I mean, what are some of the social networks you use? I mean, I use Google+, obviously. We're on it right now. Twitter, Facebook, FetLife, and I don't know. Some people trying to get me to use Pinterest, but I don't know. But what else? What are those the big ones? Are there others that you guys use?
One of the things I want to talk about, I use all of those, and we'll get into some of the specifics, I'm sure, later. But Facebook, Fet, Instagram, another kind of big one. Those kinds of things. But it's interesting because looking across our panel, we have a generally speaking straight audience or straight panel here. And so we're probably not going to get into some of the things that aren't relevant to us, but are probably relevant in terms of a broader scope for this video, which is things like Grindr, Growler, Scruff, Recon, a lot of specifically gay male social networking sites, which I'm familiar with because I spend a lot of time in gay spaces. And the social media part of that is really interesting because those specific social media apps, environments, whatever else, are almost single-handedly being blamed for the reduction in brick-and-mortar spaces for people. The ability to meet people now is so commonplace online. And again, getting into some of the specifics of how you identify and some of the things you do for social media. But
oh, looks like we lost someone. I'm sure he'll be back. You guys still there?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
The rest of us are.
Good point. There are a couple of others. I know that there was also an app released recently called Whippler, which is basically supposed to be like Grindr for kinky people. Then, of course, there's Tinder and a few others, which are generally hookup apps, but I'm going to include those in social media anyways. Some of those are specifically that we've talked about before. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Google+. I mean, people generally use those in a vanilla context as well. So let's talk a little bit about these vanilla social networks. For instance, some people will not, on Facebook, they have two separate accounts. And this became problematic for some people because they were using a nickname for their second, sort of kinky Facebook account. And it was a nickname or a handle that is not the real name. And then, of course, when Facebook started putting the kibosh on drag queens and people that were not using their real names, that became a problem for some of them. But they insist separation between, this is what my vanilla people know about, and this is my vanilla profile that most or maybe none of my kinky acquaintances know about. I understand that. Do any of you guys do that? Do you have second profiles?
I don't, personally. I'm lazy, so I just put everybody together.
No, but I have some friends that do, and one of the tricky things, I think, with having one of those is, one, it was fighting for your name when your name wasn't right, but now you have to be really careful because if your profile picture is your face and you're friends with me in your vanilla profile and you're friends with me in your not so vanilla profile, and then you comment on the same thing by accident as both people, anyone else can tell immediately that you're the same person. And if you're trying to hide from one of those people, let's say, or just keep your privacy, you can't. If you've used your face. So that's kind of a fun thing that I think
right.
people have discovered by accident.
Well, and then
Well, and
there's
I think some
also
people
sorry.
say, they might say I'm lazy, so therefore I use two separate accounts because it's too much to juggle.
Mm.
But then there are people that are saying, I'm lazy, so I just use one account and mix it all in and whatever. I guess it all depends on what what your needs are.
Well, I'm
What
also
does that
out,
sound? Is that
mostly
coming
out,
from
so
me?
that happens.
So I don't use a lot of social media. I don't Facebook, I don't use Twitter, I don't use Instagram. Um, but I recognize that one of the big dangers that I've seen is that some of the apps that I do use, like Snapchat, and I have used a thing called Uvu, which is like a FaceTime type of thing for Android. Um, these, and I think Facebook does this too, they want to go through your phone, they want to go through your contacts and your phone numbers, and they want to match up who you think you know. Um, and that's scary for me because if I have some sort of profile where I'm out and kinky, but I don't want to be out to the rest of the world, suddenly anyone that has my phone number, contacts from work, my boss for instance, if he was to sign up for Snapchat, it's going to say, hey, can we go through your phone? And if he clicks yes, then it's going to go through his phone, find his contacts, suggest that we be friends. He would recognize my face, and then all of a sudden he's got access to all of my personal information or my kinky outness. So I'm lucky in that I don't do a lot of social networking, and I'm largely out anyways. But that is a concern that people need to be aware of, that these apps are going through your contacts and trying to sync people up by phone number.
Yes, I know somebody who got really creeped out by that they were getting friend requests from people that they had no other links to. I was like, well, if you have their phone number, if they have your phone number in their contacts, their phone is matching you up to all those different profiles. It works for email addresses too. If you have somebody's email address, I can put an email address in Facebook's search bar and find whatever account is associated with that email. I think it works for phone numbers too, as long as they have that, in their profile. So you can be found a few more ways than you might even realize.
I think.
So what's the answer?
All right, go ahead, Ducky.
Oh, sorry. I think
The answer is we need to be careful about that kind of stuff, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we do need to be careful, but when I first started interneting way back in the day, my papa gave me some really good advice. He said, don't post anything online or connect anything with you that you wouldn't be okay with anyone finding. Because nothing's ever really private online, no matter how much we want to pretend like it is. It's just not. Mm-hmm. So the fact that I have nudes on my FetLife profile, then, I should be aware that anyone could see those at any point in time, especially with the one list thing. But, I post those knowing that that's a thing that could happen. And I think that we want to think we're safe and that we're able to be completely private online, and we're not. We have an unrealistic expectation of privacy when it comes to putting things out into the world.
So, you might be able to be found by your email, even if you just throw your email into Google on whatever dating site you're on, or it might be your page. If you get somebody's email address from the community, if university's website with your name and your the classes and program that you teach. You need to be careful about that and who has that information. Ducky, I think you bring up a good point. I mean, we were talking a little bit about pictures before, but sometimes, just matching up pictures, you say, oh, that person is actually that person, and then they might actually be able to find or that they might be interested. And I was speaking a little bit earlier about somebody who sort of did that to me on Facebook, where they knew who I was, my full name and my information, and they could look at my Facebook profile. Are you guys not understanding me very well?
You're kind of cutting in and out. By and large, we're getting what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm trying here. This is a new internet connection, obviously. I'm gonna have to make do, I guess. But hopefully you're getting.
You're pretty much good. Don't worry about it.
Okay. So I had someone who had my Facebook information, and then they sort of trolled my friends list. You know, looking for. I guess they assumed that any female that was on my friends list was probably kinky too. So they were using it as a as a way to find people. Well, that actually could happen, and some people won't be friends with me on Facebook, not for that specific reason, but they might be comfortable with me knowing their real name or their identity or stuff about them, but they're not necessarily comfortable with other people being able to find them through me, and being aware that that can happen, especially with the way people link up. You could expose yourself in that way, but do you guys use Facebook? Do you categorize or group your contacts?
Yes.
I mean, that's the way I manage it. And
I'm pretty bad about that in my phone, because most people only ever give me a first name, and I'm fine with that. And as a last name, I kind of try to remember traits about anybody I talk to, this be it in any organization. And a lot of times I'll put in there rope top, rope bottom, submissive dom. And that's one way to help keep people straight. Because if I got two Michaels in my phone, and I realize anybody who's surfing over my shoulder can see that, and it does kind of out some people that don't want to be.
Yeah, if you're like keeping notes on people and people have access to those notes, but when I'm talking about controlling what kind of
that's creepy in a different dossier way.
I think you probably need to go over what we're talking about. I don't think a lot of people know about the group. Michael's a rock star at it, but I think there are a lot of people that don't know how to group contacts. They don't use it as well or as easily. There's a function on there that I don't think a lot of people know about. No one else agrees with that?
I use it.
Okay.
I do too.
I use it slightly, but I don't keep up with who's looking at what. It's just for me to understand what different groups are doing that they've added me to.
Yeah, they're just your personal notes about these people. I have different categories of people in my Facebook account. You can also do that with Google Plus, where they have different circles, and you can add people to different what they call circles. So when I post something, and maybe it's kinky in nature, I'm not going to post it to the circle of family. I'm going to post it to the circle that I have called kink. Or it might even be if I have an announcement about a local event coming up. Well, all the kinky people that I know don't necessarily live around here or care about it. So I have another circle that is, local or local munch goers or something. And people can belong to a number of different circles. So I control every time I post who's going to see what. It helps a lot, but
have you ever fucked that up?
No. No, I haven't. There are a few things that you don't know when you interact with other things. So if I RSVP to an event, I don't know who sees that. Well, somebody could look at my timeline and probably see that I RSVP'd to an event, but you can also delete those items from your timeline as well. So you can RSVP and then delete it. Or if it's a private event, then it's not a problem. The thing is, you have to know this, and I think that's one of the reasons why people say, you know what, it's just going to be separate. I'm going to have this world over here, and I'm going to have this world over here, because I don't know how this shit works, and I'm going to screw it up. Now, Twitter, on the other hand, you just make an account. You can't have groups and circles and things like that. So, and they have no limitations on what kind of name you can use. You can use a nickname, a handle, whatever, and you can have 15 different Twitter accounts, and they don't care. So, that's pretty easy for most people to.
Well, and I don't use Tumblr either, but I believe Tumblr works the same way. I believe you can just kind of
if you're not using
new profiles
Tumblr, you're missing out. I'm just throwing that out there.
All right.
That's where all the good porn is, right?
Tumblr?
Yeah,
What?
Tumblr.
Oh, yeah.
What's interesting, though, is I think some of this discussion is altered somewhat with, especially a lot of the crackdown with Facebook's real name policies. I know a lot of people used to use handles on Facebook, and that became an issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people getting their accounts shut down, and there's like all this rigmarole if you want to be able to use anything other than a name that you have an ID in.
Right. Yeah, we talked a little bit about that while you were gone.
Well, yeah, but
Welcome
then
back, by the way. It doesn't count. We have to talk about it again if Shane wasn't there.
Well, I mean, if I wasn't giving my opinion, I don't know if it was the right one.
Oh, I see. But that probably has limited some people's options. I know that when I first started using, my first Facebook account was for the Louisville Munch, and I created an account called Louisville Munch, and it was linked up to a lot. I didn't have any interest in using it personally. It was linked up to a lot of people. I had a lot of, it was good. I had it rolling really well, and then Facebook pulled the plug and said, nope, an account has to be a person. You can have a page if you want or a group, but an account has to be a person.
Here's one of the things that I have found interesting about social media, though. I think it was, certainly when I first started, that people had sort of a vanilla presence on Facebook and a kink presence on some other various, kinky social media. But one of the things that I have found is that with the proliferation of Facebook, there's actually as much or more kink, leather, traffic, chatter, for lack of a better term, on Facebook, and it has, in a sense, forced people to create multiple Facebook accounts just to keep up. Like, I know the bulk of the events and all that kind of stuff I get invited to now, or that I participate in, are actually on Facebook, not on a kinky social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's forced a lot of people to wade in and risk more by being on Facebook. Like, it was nice because, various kinky social media, whether it be, Caller Space or, FetLife or whatever, were kind of like bubbles. Like, if you sort of didn't know about them, it was sort of a security through ignorance. If you weren't kinky, you wouldn't know what FetLife was, and if you came across FetLife, there's a good chance you wouldn't have signed up for it because it wasn't your bag, and it doesn't really occur to you to sign up to a social media site just to maybe possibly find somebody based on a nickname. So there was that sort of sense of security from doing that. Like, there was this real kind of division of church and state. But with the proliferation of a lot of kink activity on Facebook, it's kind of forced people to kind of start the learning curve for security on Facebook, and how do you manage that? Like, I know one of the things that people do on Facebook that's really interesting is if they have two Facebook accounts, they cannot add the same friends on both accounts, because then you start getting friends in common, and making that link becomes much, much easier. So let's just say I have a Facebook account called Shane and a Facebook account called Abraded, and I add friends on them. One of my vanilla friends sees somebody that I have listed on my fetish site, and we have 8 friends in common. And they go to look for me, and they find my Abraded profile, and all of a sudden
you've just outed everybody. You've just outed all your friends.
Well, outed myself as well.
Right.
And so you have to become very, very diligent about who you add. And the problem is that I think a lot of us who have real-life community start to realize is that then we have to start keeping track of multiple people's Facebook pages. Like, in the sense that if I want to be friends with somebody and look at their vanilla posts because I'm out, do I then have to create a vanilla Facebook profile to be able to look at their vanilla Facebook stuff? Like,
is there negotiation involved in friending people on Facebook? Like,
Ryan,
friends, but don't do this, and
yeah, I've had that. I've had people say, because I'm out, they'll say, I'll add you on Facebook, but I don't want you posting fetish stuff. I don't post fetish stuff on Facebook anyway. Like, a lot of the stuff that I do is in the private groups category. So like, an event will start up and it'll have a private group, and you can join that, and no traffic that you participate in is viewed on your timeline. You don't see it unless you're part of the group. So it's a really interesting way to manage things. Well, I was just going to say, they're really more concerned about what I might post individually, like to my timeline. You know what I mean?
You bring up a good pro tip, though. If you're going to separate those things, you do have to keep them separate. And that's
I mean, you really have to be diligent. And I have known people who have said, which account do you want access to, because you can't have both. And if you get access to this one, you can only post certain things, or I will block you.
Right. And then you have to be willing. You have to be willing to keep up on both of those as well. Go ahead, Amber.
I was just gonna say I'm like that. I have a friend that everyone here knows who she is very prolific, and she has a very open and out Facebook profile and also a family-oriented profile, and I have had to switch from one to the other because she was just posting too much and tagging me in things specifically, and it caused an issue with one of my bosses.
Yeah, you have to be careful about that. Well, let's talk a little bit about FetLife too. I know that's a big one that people are using. So, for instance, I have a pro tip for FetLife. If you don't mix your kink and your vanilla together, pick another nickname. Don't use the same nickname that you use on OkCupid. Don't use the same nickname that you use
obvious,
on, on World of Warcraft or wherever somebody might find you. It seems obvious, but I don't know that everybody gets that. So,
well, I don't know. I'm gonna side with Shane on this one and say the only way they're gonna find you on FetLife is if they're on FetLife, and if
But you
they
can
happen
Google
to,
search it.
I don't
no,
think
you can't
so.
Google search a nickname.
Google search a website, but it's not like Facebook where you can Google search a name and have a Facebook page or a FetLife page come up.
So one of the people in the community that I know is very, very cautious about her real identity being leaked out because of her profession, and she frequently Googles her own name to make sure that nothing kinky comes up. And she will Google not only her real name but also her FetLife name. And FetLife does do a really good job about not letting Googlebot and spiders crawl that site and link you directly to the FetLife profile.
I think we're talking about it backwards. So if you have your name on FetLife is one thing, and then that name is also your handle on your gaming site or your OkCupid profile, you can work back from that. Then I can go find you on OkCupid, and maybe you don't want your OkCupid to be kinky, and you don't want your YouTube channel to be kinky, and now it is because someone went the other direction.
If
It's less that they're going to find you on FetLife, then the game is up,
If you're on FetLife and you're on OkCupid trying to pick up vanilla people, you're doing it wrong. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Well, here's an interesting thing. You guys have heard of this was a sort of a recent thing in the last couple of weeks. It's called the meat list. This was something that, where somebody had basically written a screen scraping program to go log into FetLife as a certain user and go through each of the users, collecting stats about them, their ages and locations and nicknames and such, and compiling a list, because FetLife does not have a people search function. You can't search for men over 45 who are dominant within a certain radius, like some dating sites do. And FetLife has always been very proud of that they don't have such a function, and it's kind of set them apart, where people, trying to use it as a dating site, sometimes find it very difficult to. But somebody went and said, well, I can do that. I'm going to write this program. And they mined all of the information. Actually, it was all of the females under 30, or 30 and under, and compiled a list and published it online. So now that nickname that was behind FetLife's login, that could not be searched via Google, is now on some douchebag's blog. That nickname that people could, follow a link to. So just because it's hidden behind a login or not Googleable directly on FetLife doesn't mean that it hasn't been republished somewhere else.
That's true. That's a fair point.
Comments?
They were, I think the data collected was nickname or handle, age, location, sexual orientation, and DS identity, and so it was disgusting. It was a horrible thing to do, but like Ducky said, don't put anything online that you wouldn't want somebody to find out eventually. And I think that some of that, and this applies to vanilla people texting nudes to their vanilla boyfriends too. I mean, we live in an information society where you cannot guarantee privacy. And I would like to say that these actions fall into RAC, or risk-aware kink, but really it just falls into risk-aware internet activity in general.
Yeah, I agree with Brian. I think that there's one of the downsides is that we're sitting here going, well, you know, the privacy of FetLife or the privacy of various kinky social medias is one thing, but the reality of it is that if you put anything, like I know a lot of people who are on Fet who are like, you know, as they say, super protective of their identity, and so they don't post pictures of their face, for example, right? Okay, well, if I actually know you and I recognize that tattoo that you have, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's just so many things that we do that as soon as you do anything, you are carrying an inherent risk. And the level to which you are comfortable with that risk is where you have to keep yourself. You know, so I know some people that do nothing on FetLife because they don't want to be associated with that as a site. Like, just being found on that, for them, you know, would be like being forced to come out, and they don't want to do that. So there are some people who just avoid sites like that because there's an inherent risk. And no matter what kind of protections you take, there's always a risk.
Yeah, I don't think we're trying to fearmonger or scare people.
No, absolutely not.
Sites either. I think it's important to mention that some of the stuff that we're talking about it because there are a few easy steps that people can take. They're certainly not foolproof, and they don't work 100% of the time. But there's some really simple things you can do on social media if you're super, super concerned about, you know, just being more out than you want to be. We talked about some of the FetLife ones. We talked about some of the Facebook ones. I think that's what we're really talking about. And some of that can be as simple as setting it to friends only. So if, you know, so it's very possible that I'm on this list. I am a female, I'm under 30, and I'm not listed as living in Antarctica. That was also geographically linked. They didn't pull Antarctica people. They pulled people who had actual locations that they thought were realistic. I'm probably on it too, but I'm not going to get a, you know, if they can find me, they can find me, but they're not seeing any more than anybody else would have seen, and I'm aware of that risk, like what we're talking about, and the pictures that I'm a little more concerned of than the other ones I have set to friends only, and even a lot of those don't have my face. You know, like, these are just kind of easy steps. I just want to point out that that's the reason we're talking about it, not to freak people out.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, yeah. And when this happened, too, everybody was like, oh, FetLife and crappy security, and what are they doing, and how do they screw this up, and whatever, and they didn't realize the nature of this. What they thought was that the server had been hacked into and the database compromised, all their information available. No, this person just collated information that's already available.
Right.
Michael, I'd like to point out that just for the sake of interest and sort of novelty, iPhones don't have an app to communicate with FetLife. Android phones used to. They
Actually,
don't anymore.
that app, just sorry, Shane, to interject, that app was not created by BitLove Inc.
Right,
It was created by Golden Spiral.
That's not my point. The point I'm trying to make is that because there was an absence of an app, somebody actually went and built an app for iPhones, and all it was a screen scraping app that scanned for events in a geographical area. Mm-hmm. And this app allowed me to do two things, because I used to have it on my phone and it was great. It allowed me to view events coming up, and it allowed me to interact with my mail on Fet. But what was interesting is that when you looked at the events, it actually linked the people who were coming, but because it used the same screen scrape technology, unlike FetLife, actually listed the gender, age, and sexual preferences of the people attending those events. Mm-hmm. So this is not the first time this has happened. Other people have used, and this wasn't a hack, this was literally just a crawler with a screen scraper that was collating particular information to be displayed in a particular way. Now, for me, it was actually really convenient, but I was a FetLife user, so there was no information there that I didn't have access to in the first place. Mm-hmm. Right. So this is, I mean,
well,
this is not
it's
new.
because people lost their mind about FetLife and security, thinking, well, FetLife wasn't doing their job. No, FetLife was providing the service and site that they always have. It was somebody who decided, you know, it's not like, well, my information's not secure because you can't trust the webmaster or the sites, whatever. No, can't trust the user to take the information that you gave them and use it well.
This is no different than somebody with a FetLife account who essentially, even if you contemplated doing it manually for 1 million people, just went through and took all the information and wrote it down and put it somewhere else. Right. And you can't avoid that.
But now it's also outside the login wall, so it is searchable and people can find it. And if you use the same nickname, or if people say, oh, I'm going to see how many people are in, New Orleans that fit this criteria, and they just start browsing through, profiles, and they recognize that, dimple on your ass or the tattoo on your ankle or the now they might have put it together.
Crazy. I don't think that's nearly. I think that reaction is completely blown out of proportion, mostly because people don't understand what they are. We have a very clear understanding, of what happened and how it works. The people just kind of panic about stuff like that. I don't think that's anywhere near as disturbing or as kind of irking as some of those suggested friends on Facebook can be, where you're just going along and then you see that all these suggested friends, you know exactly who those people are, and that kind of freaks me out sometimes. It's just a button, just don't click it. But still, that kind of puts me off way more than these lists do because of my understanding of them.
I agree. So let's talk about mistakes that you've made. I mean, I group my Facebook contacts together, and Brian had asked me earlier if I had ever screwed that up. Not that I'm aware of, and if I did, maybe they were polite enough not to say so.
I've got a pro tip. I found this out recently that I didn't know was a Facebook feature. Because you got to remember, I'm out, so I have absolutely no filters on my Facebook. So when people say, "Oh, you can set up this security and that security," I just shrug and go, "Oh, that's nice news," But the one thing I did here in terms of protecting my friends is suggesting that your friends have a approved a tag. So if I tag people in pictures, they get a notification that says this person is trying to tag you in this picture or in this post, and they have the right to be able to say no, and my post still goes through, but they're not tagged in it.
Yes, great pro tip. That is something everybody using Facebook ought to know, whether they're kinky or not.
Yeah.
I was out, actually I was at Thunder Over Louisville with a couple of friends, and I was like taking their picture because that's what you do, and there's airplanes and fireworks, and it was a great sunny day, and they were like, "You're not going to post that on Facebook, are you?" And I was thinking like, well, why? I mean, it's like, are you ashamed to be here with me or what? And they were like, no, I called into work, and if they see that I was at a picnic drinking beer and hanging out, I might get fired. And I was like, oh, see, and if I just tagged them, if they had review over that, then they could have, stopped that in its tracks. So it's not just a kinky person thing, I don't think. I think it's good practice altogether. Amber, you had something to contribute?
No.
No. Okay. More pro tips. Anybody?
I mean,
or how about don't do's?
I've got the best pro tip of all. I've heard, well, I'm lazy, so I have 2 accounts. I've also heard I'm lazy, so I just have 1 account and I juggle. I am extra lazy, so I don't have any. I don't Facebook. I don't use Twitter. I don't Instagram. That's my best pro tip, and I recognize that that's very extremist, and everyone wants to be on Facebook, and everyone wants to be friends with their mother and their grandmother and all of their childhood friends and people they went to college with. I don't, and I don't care, and I don't feel like my life is lacking because I'm not on Facebook.
I have a less nuclear option than that.
Please.
I don't use my first and last name from my birth certificate as my Facebook name. I think some people feel this extreme pressure to use them, like no abbreviations, no other names. If you use something crazy, these naming policies of Facebook might catch you, but you don't have to use your first and last mother given name, and it's made me more comfortable because I feel a little less searchable. Same as, if my boss wants to get on Facebook and find me, I don't know if they could at this point because I purposely made it less searchable. I did it originally because of my profession. I just didn't want to be searchable by people that I work with because I work with a lot of people. But it ended up working out really perfectly for this too because it's just an easy way that I can feel a little bit better about it and people knowing all my stuff because the Facebook name I have also can't be Google searched. It's as easily. It's not my name like that, and it doesn't match my FetLife name either. So those are pretty easy ways too to give me a little more security. Not 100%.
Good tip.
So
yeah.
rather than have 14 profiles, you just have 14 actual real life identities.
I do. I'm like a superhero.
And I like that too. That was one of the first things that I found out about you was that you did, that you had sort of other names that you went by. And really, all it would take is somebody to report you as using a fake name, and Facebook would ask you for your identification. They don't go out and say Mickey Mouse. They don't necessarily catch it and let somebody say, hey, that's not the name. And the reason why these trans people and drag queens were being singled out and being harassed were because assholes were going and reporting them because these fucking queers are on here as whatever their drag queen name is, and they wanted to out them, basically. And Facebook cooperated too much. But, Josie, I think that's a good point. You've sort of flown under the radar with that because you didn't call yourself Minnie Mouse or, Wonder Woman or something like that.
Yeah,
although you should have. I think you really should have gone with Wonder Woman.
I regret it now.
All right. Pro tips, mistakes.
I have one. I just recently joined Tumblr, and I, of course, made it into a adult blog. First chance I had. And I made the mistake of connecting my Tumblr and my Facebook just by chance through my phone because I have an Android, so it just links everything up. So my Google, my Gmail, my FL app, my Facebook, everything is all linked up. And when I share one thing, it went all the way around the circle. And that was an oops. And luckily someone caught it for me.
It's searchable by your email address as well if you do that.
I have a lot of different email addresses. Lots of.
Well, and that's another good pro tip. Have lots of different email addresses, and it's not as secure as it's not the end all be all way to avoid things. But I own a couple domains and mail servers, or I rent them, I guess, and so I can just spin up new email addresses on the fly at any point, and I do it all the time. Every new thing I want to sign up for, I spin up a new email address and that gets it. So I never get the the cross contamination of email addresses, but it doesn't stop it with, say, phone numbers or this is the only reason I use Google Plus or Google Hangouts. But if I was to use it for other things, there's still cross contamination there. So get lots of email addresses, whether you pay for them or whether they're free.
You had to pay for email addresses?
I pay for mine, yes. I pay for I rent mail servers so that I can make up any email addresses I want to, like at a given domain.
Oh, okay. Neat.
I suppose it's not really a pro tip to say if you're out, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of changed. I went from being extremely out to having a very serious relationship with someone who wasn't necessarily comfortable with me being completely out. So I kind of scaled it back in respect to him. It didn't change, my status. I was still very much out, but it wasn't. I don't know. I was just more respectful about it.
I think there's a difference between being out and being like having to put it in, like having it be on the front. I don't know, the front page of who you are.
Right. There's a spectrum of outness, if you will.
Yeah.
And everyone has to kind of find what they're comfortable with. I was going to say that too. We're talking about all these ways to be safe, not to scare anybody off of social media. Just to, for some people, it's a big barrier to joining into anything because they're so paranoid about being caught or being in trouble. Not, some legitimately paranoid and some just kind of crazy people. But I think that choosing how out you're going to be is an important thing you're going to have to just embrace. You're going to have to make that choice, either whether you want to or someone's going to force you to make that choice. But I used to be super, super vanilla on my Facebook, and I still am by most accounts, but I wouldn't friend anybody who I knew from community unless I also knew them from somewhere else as well, and they had a pretty clean profile. And in the last year, I've changed that. I've had Facebook friends that I know only from community, and particularly a few of my friends who are very near and dear to me who are super out on Facebook. They have you know, maybe they have titles or they have just events that they like to post from. And I think it's been nice for me at least to be able to interact with them on that interface, to I don't know, to have them be a part of my community and my interaction. But I just pay attention to what they post. I mean, I don't want to, and what I comment on. I'm not going to comment on a picture of them in their underwear. Maybe that's the limit. But, you know, maybe everything else that they have on there is totally fine. Just because you know them from the community might not mean that something terrible is going to come back to you. And what other people see that you post on is something that you can set on your Facebook settings as well. But it's just made me feel like more of a community member. It's made me feel, I don't know, closer to a lot of my friends, because we do use Facebook all the time. We see our friends on Facebook way more often than we see them in real life. So cutting them out of that part is, you know, sometimes kind of hard on your friendship, hard on your relationship. I've found it really rewarding, is all I was trying to say, that I've been able to be a little more out and to be closer to those people. And I haven't had any negative consequences from it, except that sometimes I see a picture that I really, really want to comment on, but I don't. Really the only negative I got.
See, for me,
Well,
whenever
I'm
I
going to
move,
take the approach that it's not a matter of if you have a problem, it's a matter of when. And I'm super excited that you haven't had a problem yet, but you have to accept the risk that something might go wrong someday.
Of course, we all run that risk with any social media that we're on.
Right. But I guess the thing that's really interesting, I was going to say, is that the one thing that I've noticed about people is that social media and the gradual adding of friends has actually made it easier to create this sort of slide that makes it actually easier.
Deniability.
What's that? No, not even plausible deniability. I mean, basically just saying that when you start adding kinky friends to your Facebook thing, it doesn't necessarily imply that you're kinky. It just means that you know kinky people. But as you add sort of more kinky people, it becomes less kind of a weird thing when people see you interacting with them. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's still a little bit of that, you know, I'm not necessarily coming out, but it doesn't mean that kinky people or people who are poly, because on Facebook you used to be able to put multiple relationships. I don't know if you still can.
Nope.
But I was listed as, you know, in an open relationship on Facebook. I mean, the profile basically outs you if you set it up that way. And when I had people on there who were poly or whatever, it made it much easier for me to have discussions with people, because then I can say, well, I know about this because of my friends. Do you know what I mean? Like, it actually starts to make kinky conversations or this sort of slow process of coming out a little bit easier in some cases. At least it has for some people.
Well, and I think I'm good with that, and I think you're good with that because we're largely out. But I think that there are a whole lot of